Welcome to the Positively Healthy Mom podcast, where positive parenting meets well-being. Hello, everyone. Welcome to today's episode of the Positively Healthy Mom. I'm so excited to have a guest that I had way back in season 1 back on the show, Heather Johnston, who is the founder of Illumination Psychotherapy here in Austin, Texas. So Heather is an amazing therapist. We've actually known each other since our kids were back in kindergarten, and now they're seniors. So that says something about how long we've known each other for. So Heather, thank you for coming on to the show again. I'm so happy to have you back.
Thank you. I'm very happy to be here.
Yeah. So I know today we're really focusing on the family system because you and I both work with adults and teens. And sometimes when a family brings a teenager to us, the kind of vibe that I get, and you can say the vibe that you get, is like, here's my kid, here's my teenager. Can you help them? Can you fix them? Can you support them, whatever it is? And I have tried that approach because I've just trying to appease the parents, I guess. But I found very quick early on that doesn't really work unless we talk to the parents as well. Because the idea is that it's all a system, this family. So tell us your perspective on this.
Yes, of course. And I've had similar experiences as well. And when we look at and we think about our teens and, some people here probably also have younger kids, all children. What you're looking at is that when we talk about a family system, what we're saying is that we're not going to just look at the individual component person. We're going to look at how they interact with the people in their system and how those others interact with in and with them. And so we're taking a much bigger, more holistic approach. When we talk about systems, in this case, we're speaking about a family system. So you have the kid, the parents, maybe some siblings that are all interacting together and they're all impacting each other and being impacted by each other. And so we kind of zoom out and take this more holistic approach instead of just saying, okay, here's the teen we've identified that needs support, has some issues, needs somebody to talk to. Really what we're saying is, here's the person in the system who kind of we can identify needs help, but how is the rest of the system interacting with that individual that may be either helping or holding them back? And how are the other parts of the system really showing up? And specifically, when you and I are working with people, we're looking at the parents. There might be siblings as well, but the parents also have power over that situation. And so what I like to do is kind of have a conversation, be like, hey, you as the parent, what's your part in this system? What is, not only the need of your child, but how are you showing up in this system that's either helping or kind of holding that kid back?
Mm-hmm. Totally. And, um, you know, it's amazing how what happens at home does affect that child outside of the home. So, for example, if I have someone that's coming to me, typically my typical client is like a girl with social anxiety who's about 15 years old and she's having trouble, or a child who's being bullied, things like that. And so the parents feel like, oh, I'm supporting my child and there's nothing else I can do. So here, and then what I'll ask is, well, what are your feelings about the situation? How are you showing up? What are you doing? And what are you not doing? And a lot of times they don't realize that they're actually inadvertently, of course, very inadvertently,
Mhm.
making things worse because their feelings might be really stressed out. They might, inadvertently making the child
Yeah.
feel shame that they don't have the friends or that they're getting bullied. And so then it's just this snowball effect. And so it gets a little difficult. So how do you, and I know we both say it's like very delicate, how do you help the parent recognize or see in themselves that they might be contributing inadvertently?
So if the teen is able to identify it, then you can kind of bring it up. But I think at a big high level, if you're a parent of a kid who's having struggles, the first thing you should check is, how am I emotionally regulating myself within the system? Am I able to, and when I say emotional regulation, I don't mean you can't have a bad day or you can't, I mean, we've all as parents like lost it at one point in time. I'm like, oh man, I wish I hadn't have done that. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about, are you able to identify the feelings that are coming up for you? Are you able to understand sort of where they're coming from and be able to assess, like, is this really about my kid or about me? So the example you give is a perfect one. You can have parents who are looking at their child and they're fear parenting. Oh
Right.
my gosh, my kid doesn't have friends. And that can come from a lot of places, right? Like um, a lot of perfectionist parents, like everything needs to be perfect. And if it's not perfect, then, oh my gosh, my kid's going to fail. Or if you have a kid who has some neurodivergence, they might not need friends. And you're putting this pressure, like you need all of these friends. I'm like, well, I had two and I was like so happy. And now I feel like I'm a failure. Well, that's really coming from the parent. That's really coming from something inside of them. And there's a saying that's kind of an old saying that says kids trigger your trauma. So your kids will be doing something that's triggering a feeling in you. So for example, if you are afraid that your kid doesn't have enough friends and isn't getting A pluses in school and all of that, is that really a fear about your kid, or is that also coming maybe from something that you experienced? Like you were told if you didn't have perfect grades, then that was a problem and you weren't enough and all of these things. And so that's coming up when you're parenting your child and you're seeing things that you got in trouble for or you were made to feel small for,
Mhm.
in that case. And that's then going on to your child. And that's not really your child's to hold or to carry. So being able to kind of sit back and be like, okay, is this something that's really me, or is this a pattern I'm bringing forward from my childhood? Like some families have the silent treatment, which is really disconnecting and confusing and abusive for younger children. If you grow up in that system, no one's ever addressed it, it's just the way it is. Maybe when you get upset with your child, you pull back because that's what you didn't like it, but it's just sort of what you know. And until you work with somebody to kind of address, like, what was that like for me? And have some help working through that, a lot of the times we pass patterns through that we don't even recognize. So, really, as a parent, if you're having a kid that struggles, I would also encourage you to kind of go check into therapy or support of some kind, coaching, whatever it may be, to say, hey, like, what might be I bringing to the table here, or what do I need help with, or what do I need support with?
And that separating those two things, yeah, that self-awareness and that emotional regulation, I consider to be the foundational and like kind of the beginning steps of when I coach a parent. That's the first thing we
Yes.
do. That's the beginning of my course that I have online. And so yeah, so that's so huge. And so once they start to recognize where this is coming from and whether or not it's theirs or something that they just really want for their child, what are your next steps then?
So if you recognize it's yours, then it's sometimes even just acknowledging to your kid, oh wait, you know what? That's mine, that's not yours. Let's start over again. If you kind of realize you're having that pressure and kind of giving the kid context, like actually that was not mine. And if it is yours, I'd seek support if you don't feel like it's something that you can work with in your family system, outside support, therapy, coaching, whatever the case may be. If it is something for your child and it is a worry that you have for your child, just having an honest, emotionally de-escalated conversation, saying, hey, I'm kind of worried. My experience has been, sometimes if people aren't doing well in school, there's something else going on. Can you tell me what is it like for you at school? How are things going? How do you feel there? And have a conversation about it that is more curious about their experience and less about what your worries and your fears and the messages in your head are about. Show up to the kids with curiosity. If you think it's not really mine, I'm really worried about this. Show up with curiosity and an openness and the ability, if you kind of overstep, to say sorry, like, oof, you know what? Sorry that I was pushing too hard there. That I understand you're doing the best you can. Let's figure out what support you need, etc. Like really showing up with curiosity and compassion.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. I always say curiosity over criticism because kind of our go-to impulse is to be like, why don't you do this or something that comes across as critical instead of getting curious, ask a question, kind of find out maybe there's something we don't know that they're not sharing with us, but yet if we ask the question, they will share. So now that we're talking about this, it got me thinking to a parent who would be listening to this is what is the goal? Like for me, I heard you say the word connection. And I know for me, like that's one of the things I talk about. Like the goal is connection, not perfection, but connection.
Mhm.
When you are working with families in the family system, what is the goal?
To me, the goal is being able to understand and accept people for who they are And so that creates connection. I want to have an authentic relationship with you for who you are. And that might be, being able to step in with your child into something you don't know about. Like maybe you're not into Dungeons and Dragons and they're really into it. Showing that curiosity, showing up in their space and showing interest. Now, 9 times out of 10, your teens can be like, but you have sent a message of connection, a message of we're in this together. And ownership is the second part, real accountability for what is yours as a parent. Your child's responsibility is not to regulate your emotions. It is for you to co-regulate their emotions with them. That's part of the learning and how they learn how to regulate their emotions and how they show up. So having that bid for connection and not getting discouraged with teens who only give you 5 minutes. That's all they're going to give you, and that's a win. And
Mhm.
really kind of having these age appropriate expectations, like a teen's gonna, sometimes you'll get something, sometimes you won't, but those bids for connection stick with your kid. So just acknowledging that I'm going to put that connection out there and I'm not going to internalize it as a rejection if it's not reciprocated with what I as an adult would expect. And then
Yes.
owning accountability for the feelings that show up that are yours and be like, okay, I need to regulate myself and then I can co-regulate my child if their emotions are out of control or they're having a tough time. And co-regulation just is sitting with them, talking about it, not getting worked out, not yelling at them for being upset. There are times you're going to look at your kid and be like, I can't believe they care about this. But they do care about this. And when you were their age, you cared about something equally that your parents rolled their eyes at. And so just sitting in that moment with them and just letting them have it and kind of working through it, just with a lot, sometimes working through it is just listening. There's no fixing, just listening. And recognizing that the more energy you're bringing of connection and accountability into the system, the more you're going to regulate your teen and more going to see the behaviors and sort of the mental health, emotional health that you're looking for.
Yeah. Yeah. So what else? What else? And what the thing that actually popped up to me was because you are a boy mom, a lot of what I see is moms who get frustrated and they do feel that sense of rejection from their sons because not all sons talk as much, right?
Mhm.
And I have two sons, and so one is real chatty and the other one is very brief. And so I do just accept that that's how they are. But I have seen a lot of moms who are trying so hard to connect and they don't know what else to do. And they say, I tried talking to him in the car when we're on the way to school. And so I've kind of like coached some moms through that process of
Mhm.
it's not always a conversation. It's not always in the morning, right? It's not always what you want it to be. Sometimes it does have to be kind of like what they need it to be and when they need it to be,
Yeah.
which is kind of very inconvenient at times. But what are your thoughts about that being a boy mom?
I think that's exactly right. Boy or girl, if you have a child that isn't a talker, or you have a child that isn't one that, is like every part of the day,
Yeah.
you showing up, being consistent, being caring, compassionate, curious, that's the connection. It is not necessarily the feedback you get from them. If they feel like they're in a safe, supported environment, that's the connection they need to know that they're safe. And you may get moments where all of a sudden they're chatting about something or they're not, or, you can ask about the day. And if they don't respond, that's not really a bad thing. You're showing care. And if you kind of let it go, like, okay, if you want to talk about it later, I'm around, and just kind of take the pressure off. Where I would say, like, if you start to see a kid's behavior change radically, or all of a sudden they really go into kind of like into themselves, of course, take steps, have evaluations, make sure. But if your kid by nature is just this kid, and it might not, parenting is you don't parent the kid that you want, you parent the kid you have.
I
And a
agree.
lot of times the kid that you want are really those are your issues to work on more than the kid that you have who is just right.
Yeah. Yeah. And the words you didn't use exactly, but it made me think of just like being seen, like how the example I use sometimes when I'm teaching like a workshop or something to parents, and I give this example of, you're at the airline ticket counter because your flight got delayed, and you're trying to explain to the airline, I have to be there because I have this wedding to get to or this meeting, and you don't understand. I need a blah, blah, blah. And they're just, kind of dismissing you. They're like, we can get you there tomorrow. And they're like, no, 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 but I have to get there today. And all you want for that airline is to say, ma'am or sir or miss, whatever,
Mhm.
we understand you need to be there. We will do everything we can in our power to get you there on time. We understand that this is a big deal for you. And then you just are like, yes,
Yes, you understand.
right. And
And
so it's that understanding and the seeing, like that acknowledgement, like this is where I'm at right now, and you're hearing me.
And especially important with teens, right? Because teens are in this phase where they're starting to build autonomy. And as part of that process, they have to pull away from the parent. And that's natural and that is good. And allowing your teen to stretch their wings and know that you always have their back, but you're not like, why aren't you talking to me? That gives them a lot of strength to come back when they need to, when they're scared, when there's something going wrong, or they're just unsure. They're coming back into the fold, but they still get to stretch their wings in really that safe way. And I think when I talk about parents having things come up, a lot of times I've noticed that the things that the parents are concerned about aren't necessarily the things that teens are concerned about. And so, and there might be things like if your kid doesn't do their homework at all, agreed, we got a problem, there's something we got to do. Um, so there are lines and it's a spectrum. But when I talk about parents acknowledging what's coming up, it's not just for the benefit of the teen, it's for the benefit of the parent. Because if there's that much kind of dysregulation within you where you're like, ah, we have to do this or this, or not doing this, or why aren't they this, or why aren't they that? You're carrying a lot of emotion that a lot of times is kind of painful and sad or scared. And having a place to work through that, figuring out where is it coming from? Is it situational? Like there's a lot going on at work right now, and I've got a lot of responsibilities at home, and I'm having marital problems. So my emotional bucket is depleted, and I'm trying to parent, and I feel like I'm failing. Is it situational like that? Or is it more like, boy, there's a lot of stuff I didn't realize I was carrying from for a long time. And boy, it'd be really nice to set that down. Really nice to kind of process that and set that down. And then show up in my parenting space as a lot more comfortable with the chaos of children and actually be able to be present in it. And so when I look at it, it's a benefit for the entire system. It's not just for the benefit of the child, but it really can truly help kind of lift a burden off the parent's heart as well, to also see somebody and talk about these things and recognize, like, what am I bringing into the system and why am I holding all of this still?
Yeah. And when you say that, it makes me think of, I've had different experts on my show before that some of them specialize in marriage specifically.
Mhm.
And it's always really interesting about how one spouse might be really into this and kind of into looking inside themselves and looking at the past and
Mhm.
figuring things out and trying to make a better life for themselves. And, their partner might not be into that. And so,
Yes.
what is your approach on maybe encouraging that, or how a person can just be okay with that?
With either being in or out marriage wise or just in general in the family systems.
Marriage, but into going to therapy, going to kind of talk about things.
So there's kind of no one right way for everybody, and that's okay. There are people who really want to deep dive and get in there. There are people who are like, I'm not really that interested. And if you might have friends you talk to for the people who aren't that interested, to be like share experiences. Like, am I the only one seeing this with kids? Okay, I'm not the only one. All right, maybe you can leverage that. Some people have, people through their spiritual, whatever their spiritual belief is, maybe your partner. The one good thing about therapy is it's a place where you can go and say all the things that you don't want anybody to know and don't want held against you later on. Because you can tell friends things, but then they kind of always, they may, depending on what it is, you may not be like, I don't really want them to remember this. So therapy is a great spot for that. And therapy can be it can be a lot of stuff. It can be a deep dive into what's really going on. Or I work with parents who are just like, this is what's coming up with me in parenting. And then we just kind of work at that level of like, okay, where do you think that's coming from? Like, how do you want to show up without having to dig all the way down into maybe some things that you're like, that's too much. Or maybe I don't have a lot. I just was never really told how to be a parent. We don't have a lot of really good modeling on how to parent, especially teens, where it's not just like do as I say, kind of thing. There's not a lot of great modeling that's been in the past. There's more now. So maybe I just didn't have the skills. Maybe I just didn't know what this is supposed to be. And I'm just kind of overwhelmed. And I've got 3 kids, and now, I've got one in therapy and one who cries a lot and one who never talks and blah. So there are all different ways you can kind of check yourself against the system, whether it's friends, therapy, your partner, etc. Sometimes it's a little easier if it's not your partner, because when it's your partner, sometimes there's, other things that are there between the two of you, and you might not always want to be like, gosh, she's right, or they're right, or whatever, so it can be tricky sometimes if they've told you several times something, and then all of a sudden you realize that you're like, oh man, I gotta go back and be like, you were right. And sometimes that's where friends come in handy as well. So I think there's no one right way. I think the key is awareness. I'm aware that when I operate with my family, I'm a part that is acted upon, and I act upon them. And if in a case where you have a teen or a child that you're like, they need support, having the awareness that I may be impacting on that as much as I'm being impacted on, and how can I show up? And that to me is really like the first critical step, is that awareness that I'm a part of the system, and that doesn't, and even if I'm doing something inadvertently wrong, that doesn't make me bad. That makes me human. And being human is messy, and that is okay. But now that I know that, how do I want to show up in this space?
That's perfect. So, last big question is for the mom who's listening, who's never been to therapy, but this conversation is kind of intriguing to her. What do you think is the first step to maybe overcome any barrier she might have, any apprehension she might have? How can you make it an easy process?
Yes, and it is usually when people come to therapy, they have to work up the courage,
Yeah.
even to look somebody up and then to make the phone call. So if somebody at home is listening and they're like, feel like, oh, this is scary, you are in good company. That is a feeling that most everybody has, especially if they've not had experience with therapy before, because there's some stigmas, and maybe I don't even know why I want to go in, or maybe I just kind of feel anxious, or I just can't, I'm not exactly sure what it is. Um, I would say it's okay to feel uncomfortable. And if in terms of like finding a therapist, that also can be pretty daunting. So you can ask people for recommendations. Somebody recently found me using Chat GPT.
Yes, I've had that happen too. People come
They
to
they put in kind of what they needed, and Chat GPT spit out some examples or some suggestions, and then you can go to that website and really see if that person feels like, can I relate to that person? Because the most important thing in therapy really is, do I connect with the therapist? And the therapist is going to use some sort of modality. The modality really doesn't matter as long as they have one and are using it. The biggest part is, do I have that connection where I feel comfortable with this person to share my vulnerability?
yeah.
And you don't have to know what the outcome is. You don't have to know what process you need to take together. That's what the therapist is there for. It's more, if you feel you need support and you're like, I'm just feeling really anxious and that's all I can tell you, or I really am worried about my kids and I want parenting advice, whatever the case is, you can kind of search their tools or Psychology Today, which is not easily searchable. I would say definitely friend recommendations, if there was somebody that was working with you, for example, who wanted to level up into therapy, I'm sure you've got people you refer to. ChatGPT is definitely an interesting new way to look for somebody. But go in with this idea that you don't have to perform for anybody. Therapy is your journey. Your therapist is there to walk with you. They're not there to tell you what to do, who to be, how to feel, and make you feel bad. They're there to walk on the journey with you and help discover like what is sitting on your heart, and how can we get you to a place where you feel like your more authentic self is showing up.
Mm. I think that's so great. Everything that you just said, because I know there's somebody that thinks, oh, I kind of want to do this, but I don't even know what I would say. I don't know how to answer the questions on the little intake form, but you can just say, I don't know, right? Like just say, I'm not sure yet. And maybe we'll figure it out when we get there, when, I have this meeting with you and things like that. So Heather, how can people find you going forward?
My website is psychotherapy.com. And that's kind of the best way to find me. And I'm, if, and I'm also somebody, I'm a big believer. If you reach out to me and you're like, I don't know where to go, I don't know what to do. If it's not my area of work, I will help you find somebody else. Like,
Mm,
we're in it together. You've reached out, you've taken a big step. We will figure this out. And you can also, if you wanted to email me, it's just info@illumination-psychotherapy.com. And so,
that's awesome. We'll be sure to
yeah.
link the website in the show notes. So Heather, thank you so much for taking the time.
Well, thank
You're
you so
my
much.
favorite guest. So great to have you back, and I'm sure I'll have you again in the future.
Sounds great. Take care.
Thanks. Bye-bye.
Bye.